Let's take a look at the mixing console. This is the mixing console included inside of the application. And although it may look pretty complicated, it's actually quite simple. Try looking at it vertically and not horizontally, as each strip is actually just repeated across the mixing console. Once you learn one set of controls, you know them all. So let's look at one strip top to bottom. Up top we have the input selector, just like in the track view. This is where we can actually choose what audio inputs we're using on this track. If it's a MIDI track, we would see our MIDI inputs. Below that is our trim control. This is a way of adjusting the volume input to the channel. Below that is the EQ. This is a 4-band EQ that's built in on every channel. To turn it on, press the EQ Enable button, and from there you can pick what type of EQ each band has. So I'm going to have a low shelf. Go ahead and turn that up. And you can see it being displayed inside of the EQ plot graph. If I'd like to work on a full EQ plugin, simply double-click the plot and the equalizer plugin for that particular channel will appear. When you're finished, simply close it. Below the EQ is the effects patch point. This is where I can patch my effects inside of the application. It's very easy to do. Simply right-click, select Audio Effects, and then pick any of the effects included inside of your application. If I pick a tempo delay, for example, it's automatically patched to the track. If I want to take its settings and copy them to another track, hold down the Control key and simply Control-drag over. Now I have 2 copies of the exact same effect. I can have as many effects on each channel insert as I want. My only limitation is the speed of my CPU. Below the effects patch point is the Send section. The Send section is where I can choose to take information on this particular track, in this case it's a vocal harmony, and send it to another place in the mixing console. Whether it's a subgroup that contains multiple tracks that I'd like to put one effect on, therefore saving CPU, or if it's a headphone mix, then route it to a different output on my sound card. Below that are my read and write automation buttons, my mono stereo button. This is handy for some plugins that can only accept a mono or stereo input signal, regardless of the original source material. Next to that is the phase flip, and also the input echo. Our mute, solo, and record buttons, pan controls, volume, audio meters. You can adjust the display of your audio meters by simply right-clicking. From there you can choose which dB range you'd like to see for this particular track. Below that is the track icons, and below the icons is my routing control. I can choose whether a track is routed to the output of the sound card, an existing bus, or a new bus that I have created. Finally, below that, I can name the track. On the lower left-hand side of the console are my quick controls. Just about everything inside of the console can be configured, so I can choose whether or not I want to see my tracks, my buses, or my main outputs. Also, to save on screen real estate, I can have wide channel strips or narrow. This is helpful if I'm mixing many tracks at once and would like an overall view of the mixing console. Below that is where I can actually choose which parts of the mixing console I want to see, whether it's the EQ plots, the inputs, the effects patch points, the sends, mute and solo buttons, track icons, and the outputs. This is very handy if I want to configure the console just to be a meter bridge or just an effects patch point so that I can use it in conjunction with the track view. Currently I have vocal tracks soloed. These are harmonies inside of a larger mix. These 3 tracks are routed here to this particular bus. As you can see, a bus is very similar to a channel strip, as it has EQ, effect sends, patch points, and also volume pan controls. So I have my multiple tracks, and they're running to this input. Let's take a listen.
Sounds jump from the highest cliff.
What I'd like to do is put a reverb and a delay on this particular track. As I mentioned before, the source material is 3 separate audio tracks. To put an individual reverb and delay on each one of the tracks would equal a total of 6 plugins. I can get the same effect by using just 2. I'm going to copy the delay from this bus to my new bus. And I'm also going to copy my studio verb. Again, this is done by holding down the Control key. Let's take a listen now. I can now use the volume to control how much reverb is included in the mix. Now maybe I'd like to hear this in context in the song. That sounds good. Now let's bring in the lead vocals and hear how it sounds with the harmony lead vocal and the band together. So remember, any track can be routed to any bus, which can then be routed to another bus or to the final outputs.